Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Hey, everybody. So we're going to try something a little different this week. We're doing a bonus episode, right? Like an extra bonus episode. And, we did a podcast survey a little while ago, not too long ago. And several of you said, hey, take a shot. Do a solo episode, which super weird to me, but I'm happy to lean into this challenge. So here we go. So here's the thing, right? I feel so fortunate to have interviewed so many incredible guests, right? Like business leaders and athletes and CEOs and coaches and, founders and entrepreneurs. And I have learned so much from these conversations. I mean, so many nuggets, like leadership nuggets, awesome nuggets. So what I want to walk you through today is 7 mindset shifts to reimagine your role as a leader. And to take it a step further, I also created a playbook with 7 leadership development exercises to accompany each of these mindset shifts, each of them. For each mindset shift, you'll get an exercise that's going to help you apply the work to your own life. Because remember, to be a better leader, you have to put in the work, right? You can get all of that at mollyfletcher.com/mindset shifts. Again, that's mollyfletcher.com/mindset shifts. I'll also include, by the way, a link in the show notes for today's show. Here's the thing. Adopting these principles will help you reach your full leadership potential and make your greatest impact on the world. And so let's dig into the 7 mindset shifts. 7 mindset shifts. All right, here we go. Mindset shift number 1. Drum roll. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Here's the thing. The great John Wooden, legendary basketball coach who's known obviously for his success as a coach on the court, and what a man with just unbelievable humility, great humility. So Coach Wooden said, you can't let praise or criticism get to you. That it's a weakness to get caught up in either one. That's what Coach Wooden said. So in other words, what he's saying, right, is like, don't get too high or too low, because here's what he means. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the people that you lead. It's about the customers that you serve, right? Don't believe the hype. I remember, the best athletes and coaches in the world, they do a great job of trying their best not to read all the stuff that's said about them in the media, the good and the bad, because it just takes you on this roller coaster ride. And if you start sort of consuming all that, you consume all that hype, then you begin to look inward. And at the end of the day, great leaders, yes, we have to have self-awareness, but we also have to make sure that at the root of what we do, that it isn't about us, right? It's about the people that you lead. It's about the customers that you serve. That's what it's about. And if you believe the hype, you can lose track of that really core, really important component, right? So mindset shift 1, don't believe the hype. Here we go. Mindset shift 2, get uncomfortable, right? Your comfort zone is such a dangerous place to be. It's such a dangerous place to be. I saw this all the time with the best athletes and coaches in the world. The best ones embrace discomfort. They embrace the pit in their stomach. They embraced those moments, that pit in their stomach, because what they found over and over again is when they stepped into that pit, when they stepped into those tough moments, when they leaned right into that pit in their stomach, guess what they found? They found that they came out a little bit better version, right? I tell you, a story, a client forever, John Smoltz, right? Smoltz was a guy that many of you know, right? He went from a starter to a closer to a starter. When John was asked to step into that closer role, that was a really big change. I mean, here's a guy who, for, ever was a starter. I mean, he would step on the mound and he would throw, 80 or 90 pitches and he'd sit down. And 4 or 5 days later, he'd do it again. And John would play golf every day in between. And that was his world. And he was amazing. Cy Youngs, All-Star games, all that. Then the organization says, hey, will you step into the closer role, right? Like, this is a big shift. Now he's in the bullpen waiting for the phone to ring, getting up, warming up, going in, sometimes not going in. Totally different. And John chose to step into that role as a closer. And he stepped into that role. And not only did he step in, and yes, it was scary, and yes, it was uncomfortable, and yes, it was new, and yes, it was challenging, and yes, it was change. But guess what John found? He led the National League as a closer in his very first season with 55 saves. Right? John went into the Hall of Fame as not just one of the best starters, but one of the best closers to ever pitch in the bigs. It didn't feel good when he stepped into it, but what he found was, right, he was able to contribute to his team, to his city, to his community, to his teammates, to Bobby Cox in some magical ways by getting a little bit uncomfortable. John and I actually talked about this. He joined me on Game Changers on our show, on this show. It's actually episode 49 if you want to check it out. But here's the thing. John and any of the other great athletes, they get comfortable being uncomfortable. They get comfortable being uncomfortable. Great leaders consistently stretch beyond their comfort zone because you know what? They recognize that's where growth happens. They've learned that little moments create big outcomes. And if they can step into the messy, into the uncomfortable, if they can step into all that, they learn and they grow and they get better and they contribute more and differently in better ways, right? So mindset shift 2, get uncomfortable. Mindset shift 3, prioritize what matters. What's most important? Here's the thing. Nick Saban, ultra successful Alabama football coach, right? I mean, he doesn't talk about winning. Nick doesn't talk about winning. You know what? He talks about what he preaches, really. He preaches the process. The process is built on being in the moment. It's built on focusing on what you can control, right? You hear great coaches talk about this all the time. Control the controllables. You know, as Saban says, he says this, be where your feet are. Be where your feet are now, Nick says. That's what he says. Success is a result of consistently asking ourselves, what's important now? What's important now? Remember that acronym. That's the WIN, W-I-N, that Saban's focused on, right? What's important now? I saw this a lot with athletes I worked with because, trust me, you can't last at the pro level. You can't last at the pro level if you don't have the ability to focus on what's most important. Heck, I remember Jason Hayward, right, big league guy, comes into our office when we started, right when he was coming out in the draft, and he was top round pick, and he comes and sits in our office, and he sits down, and I found this fascinating for a young guy coming out of high school, top round guy. And he sits down. Now, all these deals are coming at him, right? Card signing deals, appearances, endorsements, all this stuff. And Jason really looked at all those things and thought, those are distractions from my priorities. Those are distractions from what matters most. And so what Jason intentionally did in that moment is said, look, here's what I know. I know that if I don't focus on those things and instead focus on putting up great numbers, right? On staying healthy, on getting in the extra work, on staying, fit, eating right, doing all those things. If I focus on my emotional, my mental, my physical health, all those things, then everything else, all those opportunities, those will be there later, right? So Jason stayed focused, and guess what? He hit 277 with 18 home runs, 72 RBI in 142 games out of the gates that first season. I remember a really similar situation with Matt Kuchar. Kuch comes up to the office and we sit down and we were locked in on making sure that he prioritized what matters most. And so we sat down and really looked at everything from his coach to, equipment, to the ball, to his schedule. I remember the amount of time that we spent talking about his schedule so that he could stay locked in, peaking at the right tournaments, playing in the right tournaments based on his game and the golf courses and all those things. But what Matt, who looks at what he does like a CEO, says, how am I going to make sure that I prioritize what matters most so that I can perform on the golf course and execute like I know and like I believe that I can? And the only way Matt could do that is if he locked in and was clear on what matters most. Both of these guys, Kuch and Hayward, both of them, they understood the power of the question, where will I focus my energy? To me, that's a related but really different question than how am I going to spend my time? And here's the thing, that's the question that most of us default to. What we focus our energy on in life, good or bad, is what will grow. Great leaders have tremendous clarity around what matters most. And they ensure alignment between priorities and where they put their energy. And without this level of clarity, right? Without this level of clarity, you can find yourself wildly off track, right? So, mindset shift 3, prioritize what matters most. Be where your feet are, right? Be where your feet are. I love it, from Saban. All right, mindset shift 4, learn from others, right? Learn from others. Leadership, and leaders know this, it can be lonely if you aren't looking to learn from others. The best leaders, they dare to be open to what they don't know. Real leaders are really fueled by curiosity. They're lifelong learners who use curiosity to build confidence, right? Their own confidence, certainly, and their teams. Here's the thing, in all the interviews that I've done for this show, over 100 interviews, unquestionably, the one commonality with all of them is curiosity. And one of the interviews that I did with NFL Hall of Famer, Tony Gonzalez, Tony told me, success leaves clues. I heard a similar message from John Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Whole Foods. He talked about this on the podcast the other day. It's actually episode 101. You would think this is what he did, right? That he went to undergrad and then he got an MBA and then he progressed through the leadership ranks, right? That's what you would think a story like a guy who founded Whole Foods, that's his story. But he was actually a philosophy major and a college dropout, right? He didn't love classes, to say the least. But what John is, he's a lifelong learner, right? When he first started Whole Foods, he said he devoured business books, hundreds of them. His appetite to learn and his curiosity was insatiable. Today, that single health food store he opened in Austin, Texas, is a multinational supermarket chain with more than 500 locations. As John puts it, every day is an opportunity to wake up and be excited, yes, right? Not just excited about what you're going to accomplish, right, or what are you going to do, or all those things, but it's an opportunity to be excited about what you're going to learn. When a leader is unafraid to learn, it gives everyone else on the team the freedom to choose the same. So mindset shift number 4, learn from others. Learn from others. Man, I can't reiterate that enough. Mindset shift 5, remind yourself of what's beyond yourself, right? In other words, here's the thing, be anchored in purpose. Here's what I find so interesting. Companies have really powerful purpose statements, right? So why don't we? Companies have vision statements, mission statements, and they lean into those as their guiding light, right? It funnels their decisions, their priorities, the kind of customers they go after, all that stuff, right? Like Nike's, right? There's this, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. They say, if you have a body, you're an athlete, right? Southwest, to connect people to what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost travel. It's like when you start a business, one of the first things people do is build a mission statement. They lock in on that, right? They put it on the wall. They put it on their website. It's everywhere. So why don't we as people? Here's the thing. A purpose statement, what it does, it forces you to think deeply about your life. Clarifying your purpose helps you hone in. It helps you hone in and lock in on the things that are truly important to you, right? It helps become a funnel for you. Years ago, I worked on this myself. And mine I'll share is to connect, inspire, and lead with courage and optimism. And so that then becomes a filter of, what I say yes to and what I say no to, how to navigate challenges, opportunities, conversations, relationships, all that. So what's your purpose statement, right? Because when we do this, it reminds you of what's beyond you. Most people's purpose statement involves others. So what's your purpose statement? Because if you aren't clear on it, here's the thing. I think it's impossible to lead. It's impossible to lead. So mindset shift 5, remind yourself what's beyond yourself. All right, here we go. Mindset shift number 6, own your ownership. Own your ownership. In other words, what's your role in it? Right? So the best athletes in the world, after games, good and bad, the best ones, they break down the film. They look at the film so that they can look at the things they did well and certainly the things they could do better. Sometimes the problems are things you did, right? Sometimes, though, it's what you didn't do. When your team falls short, I would just challenge you, ask yourself, what didn't you do? What didn't you do to prepare them? What's your role in this as a leader? I remember when we negotiated Billy Donovan's contract to go from the University of Florida to the Orlando Magic. So we negotiate this contract. Those contracts aren't crazy complicated, but for 4 or 5 days, we're just going back and forth with the team and Billy on the base and the bonuses and all the perks and all the stuff, right? And so we're just going back and forth on the terms of the deal. We come to terms. It was on like a Thursday. Then they want to do a press conference. So we fly down to Orlando for the press conference. Billy executes 6 original agreements, right? He goes down and does the press conference, does a great job, super calm, ready, prepared, kills it. The next day, Billy calls and he says, listen, I don't want that Magic's job. Never mind. I just want to stay at Florida. Whew, man, talk about owning your ownership. It was like looking back at that, I couldn't help but reflect on the fact that never once inside of that process of negotiating that contract, never once did we, hey, Billy, listen, are you ready to walk into that locker room and tell those guys, hey, I'm going to the NBA? Are you ready to have a difficult conversation with your AD and tell them you're doing it? Are you ready to say, maybe do an exit press conference with the fans and say, I'm going to the NBA? Are you ready for all that? No, right? You know how sometimes there's a problem and you sort of think, man, I'm so pumped they didn't bring it up. Like I'm glad that client didn't ask. The thing is, you want a problem to get really good, just ignore it. Just throw it over in a petri dish and let it go, and it'll get good. When you think about own your ownership, it's about owning the mistakes and knowing what can we learn from it. Take ownership and ask yourself, what role did you play in it? Own your part in it when things go wrong. The bottom line is, here's the thing. When something doesn't go as planned as a leader, I think you have to dig deep on your role in it. You've got to dig deep on your role in it and learn from it. So mindset shift 6, own your ownership. Own your ownership. Mindset shift number 7, value pushback. Surround yourself with people who will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. This is one we talked about. I talked about it a ton with Kim Scott. Kim Scott's the author of the book, Radical Candor, and she was on the podcast. She was on the show, episode 71, actually. So Kim is a former Google and Apple executive, and she wrote a book called Radical Candor, and it has really inspired different thinking around management. So radical candor, it's sort of a simple idea, right? To be a good boss, she says, you have to care personally and challenge directly. Here's the thing. This simple framework, I think, can guide every conversation that you have and help you build better relationships. Because the higher the rungs of the leadership ladder that you go, the more likely you're going to find yourself surrounded by people who tell you yes. Don't fall into that trap. Don't fall into that trap. My friend and Focus brand executive, Kat Cole, came on the show, and she talked about her rule for feedback, and I love this. And I found it to be super helpful and powerful. Our conversation is actually episode 11, if you want to check it out. Here's what she said. She said, when you receive tough feedback, assume for a moment that it's true. Wow. This is so simple. But how many of us actually kind of go there, right? That you get feedback and you assume for a moment that it's true. Not many, right? Our natural inclination is to get a little bit defensive, right? Instead of getting curious. And that's exactly what this challenges you to do. Here's the thing. The best are coachable. They love feedback. They seek it. And yes, that applies to leaders. I love this. In 2012, here's the thing. Serena Williams had been beaten in the first round of the French Open to the 111th ranked player in the world. It was her first ever opening round defeat in a Grand Slam tournament. At the time of this, right, she hadn't won a major in 2 years. She had some health issues that were possibly going to derail her totally derail her career. The very next day, she texted Patrick, who was not her coach at the time, and she asked if she could hit at his training academy while he was preparing for Wimbledon. Well, I mean, you've got Serena Williams calling you to ask you to hit at your academy. What do you think he said? Of course. Yes, he said, I'll see you tomorrow. So she shows up the next day, and she looks at Patrick and she says, look, I want to return to number one in the world. She said, what do you think I need to do? What do you think of my game? Literally, Patrick looks at her, and what do you think? I mean, here's a guy, and he said, I had one chance. This is what he said. I love this. I have one chance to work with the greatest of all time. That's what Patrick thought to himself in that moment. So what do you think he tells her? He looks right at Serena Williams, and he says, first of all, here's the thing. I think you are an underachiever. You know, he wasn't afraid to be straight. He wasn't afraid to be candid, and it worked because no one talked to Serena like that. I mean, that honestly, that transparently, they all just kind of wanted to work with her. So they told her what she wanted to hear, not necessarily what she needed to hear. I saw this all the time as an agent, right? People telling my players what they wanted to hear. It made me sick. Here's the thing. The next day, Serena, she was on the court working with Patrick, and he's been her coach ever since. And here's some stats that are cool. After hiring Patrick as her coach, Serena, she reeled off 19 victories in 19 straight matches. She won titles at Wimbledon and at the US Open. And then she closed out the year, get this, with a 36-1 record. And then Serena and Patrick, the dynamic duo, right, as you could call them, they went on to win 10 more Grand Slams. And Serena, she holds the Open era record with 23 Grand Slam titles to her name. I mean, she's ridiculous. And then she returned to number one in the world. Mindset shift number 7, value pushback. Seek it out, right? Look for it. Look for feedback. So these are 7 mindset shifts that I see show up repeatedly during my conversations with leaders on this show. And here's the good news. These are all controllables. These are all things that we can control. Let me quickly run through these again. Here we go. Number 1, don't believe the hype. Number 2, get uncomfortable, right? Get uncomfortable. That's when we grow. Number 3, prioritize what matters. Number 4, learn from others. Learn from others. Be curious. Boy, that one comes up all the time. Number 5, remind yourself of what's beyond yourself. Remind yourself of what's beyond yourself. Number 6, own your ownership. And number 7, value pushback. So here's the thing. How can you put these into action in your own life? Go to mollyfletcher.com/mindset shifts to download my playbook with 7 leadership development exercises that accompany these mindset shifts. Again, that's mollyfletcher.com/mindset shifts. I'll also put the link in the show notes. Here's the thing. Do these 7 things and it will transform the way you lead. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.